This is Euronews Tonight. Here are your top stories. EU members reach a deal on making emergency gas cuts this winter amid fears of an energy crisis if Russia cuts off supplies. The IMF slashes the global GDP forecast, saying that the outlook looks gloomy and more uncertain.
Here in the Cube, we'll debunk claims that Oxford University is revoking the degrees of thousands of students with links to the Kremlin.
And at the Euros, it is semi-final time as England prepare to take on Sweden. I'm Helena Humphrey. It is good to have you with us. EU energy ministers have agreed to curb gas use across the bloc in a bid to reduce dependence on Russian supplies. The decision follows an announcement yesterday by Russian energy giant Gazprom that it will slash natural gas deliveries through the Nord Stream 1 pipeline by 80%. Brussels has asked all 27 member states to reduce consumption by 15% in order to ensure supply throughout the winter. The initiative is voluntary for now, but could become mandatory if Russia cuts supply entirely or if demand is too high. Well, the Czech Republic's Deputy Prime Minister Josef Sikela says that the deal will help to ensure a safe winter ahead.
Today we are sending a strong signal, not only to Vladimir Putin, who once again failed to divide the European Union, but most importantly to our citizens. Today's decision ensures we will not have to face dramatic consequences in winter, including gas scarcity or the price spikes.
Well, our correspondent Shona Murray is covering the ministers' energy meeting there in Brussels. She joins me now. Shona, after this deal was reached, I saw a tweet from the EU presidency saying that this was not mission impossible. But there were an awful lot of concerns, I have to say. So how will this work?
Yes, so by and large, the EU has agreed to reduce its gas demand by 15% by each member state. But when you look into the detail, there's been a fair few derogations for certain countries. For example, the island countries like Cyprus, Malta, Ireland, they're completely exempt from it because they're not interconnected with other member states' gas networks. There's also derogations for the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, because they're not connected to the European electricity system. And there's potential derogations for countries like Portugal, France and Spain, because of their strong gas infrastructure and networks, they can be used to export LNG gas to the rest of Europe. So the plan initially, as we talked about last week, was supposed to save 45 billion cubic metres of gas. It'll be less than that because of the derogations, around 30. But the EU is still confident that this is a worthwhile plan because of what we've seen lately with Putin and Russia gradually but very much reducing the amount of gas being sent to Europe. So it's still a strong, important measure despite the derogations.
All right, Shona, so what will this then mean for consumers? And of course, I'm including everyone using energy in that, because can Europe essentially survive this winter this year with less or even with no Russian gas altogether? Well, the plan is really to take for granted that there will be a complete shutdown of Russian gas throughout Europe. That's the idea. I mean, that's what the expectation is, and that's what this plan is to mitigate for. But there's a few things we don't know, mainly how cold is it going to be this winter. The EU believes that with this plan in place and with the ability to get new LNG gas from Canada, the United States, Azerbaijan, which has doubled its productivity to the European Union, Norway and other countries, that they'll definitely safely get through this winter, even if it is a cold winter. But it's up to each member state to decide how to reduce the demand as well. But there's also derogations for critical industries like hospitals and agriculture, certain other industries. But it does remain to be seen how it'll impact on the average consumer, and we'll have to look at some of those factors as the weeks and months roll on into winter. All right, covering this story for us from Brussels, our correspondent Shona Murray there. Shona, good to talk to you. Thank you.
Well, the European Council has also agreed to renew its growing list of sanctions against Russia for another 6 months. All measures previously adopted by the EU will be extended until the end of January 2023. Now, the sanctions date back to 2014. They were significantly expanded after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and they consist of a broad range of measures, including personal sanctions against Kremlin officials and restrictions on Russia's finance, energy and technology sectors. Well, Russia is continuing to launch missile strikes at targets on Ukraine's Black Sea coast. That is despite the warring countries agreeing a breakthrough deal on grain exports from the region. Among the areas hit was the resort town of Zakota, located west of the port city of Odessa. Meanwhile, in Kharkiv, rescuers are continuing to search the rubble for survivors after an airstrike on an art centre there. And in signs of further divisions between Russia and the West, the Kremlin says that it will leave the International Space Station after 2024. Russia has worked alongside international partners on the ISS since its launch in 1998. But Moscow's new space chief says they'll now aim to create their own orbital station. Thomas Blade has the latest.
The International Space Station once represented a new hope for the world after the Cold War. But Russia now says it will quit the outpost amid tensions with the West over Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Yuri Borisov, the chief of Russia's space agency, says his country will leave the International Space Station after 2024.
I think that by this time we will start putting together a Russian orbital station. The space industry is in a difficult situation. I view my main goal, along with my colleagues, as not dropping but instead raising the bar. And most of all, to provide the Russian economy with the necessary space services.
Orbiting 250 miles from Earth, the International Space Station is jointly run by the space agencies of Russia, the US, Europe, Japan and Canada. Its crew researches zero gravity and tests equipment for future space journeys. Thomas Blade, Euronews.
Gloomy and uncertain, that's the International Monetary Fund's forecast for the global economy. Ben Turner has the story.
The International Monetary Fund is issuing a gloomy outlook as it slashes global growth forecasts for 2022 and 2023. Experts say the world's three biggest economies, the US, China and the Eurozone, are faltering and facing higher inflation rates than previously forecast.
The global economy is still reeling from the pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We're now facing a gloomy and uncertain outlook. Global output growth has been revised downwards to 3.2% this year and 2.9% next year, while inflation has been revised upwards to 6.6% in advanced economies and 9.5% in emerging and developing economies. The world's three largest economies, the US, China and Europe, are stalling.
Russia's war with Ukraine has already impacted economies around the world. A grain export deal was reached in recent days between Kiev and Moscow in an attempt to prevent a global food crisis. Ben Turner, Euronews.
Well, the cost of living crisis was at the heart of last night's debate between two candidates vying to become the head of the UK's Conservative Party and, in turn, the country's next Prime Minister. Now, in a televised debate, Foreign Secretary Liz Truss and former Treasury Chief Rishi Sunak clashed over taxes, inflation and the UK's relationship with China. Now, in August, the country's 180,000 Conservative Party members will cast their vote for one of the two, with the results being released on the 5th of September. Reporting from London for us is Tig Enright. Good evening to you, Tig. Good to see you. This leadership debate last night has kind of been billed as the fiercest clash yet between the two candidates. They've got another one coming up tonight. But what were your key takeaways from what we saw last night?
Yeah, another one tonight and another one later this week. Helena, the candidates were certainly not holding back on criticising each other. It was hot-tempered, it was tempestuous, and even though there were these appeals from many within the Conservative Party, grandees of the Conservative Party, for the an end, a cessation, a ceasefire of these so-called blue-on-blue attacks. The two candidates didn't listen, no matter what damage they were doing to the Conservative Party's brand, as some people would have seen it, or indeed to the reputation of the government, in which one remains a member and one was a member just up until a few weeks ago. As you say, it was the economy and the cost of living crisis which was very much to the fore of this battle of ideas. They turned it into a battle of conservative economic principles. The frontrunner, Liz Truss, calling for immediate tax cuts, saying that that is what conservatism is all about. Her challenger, Rishi Sunak, the former finance minister, saying that tax cuts now simply cannot be afforded. They would have to be funded by borrowing, and that they would add further fuel to the fire that is the cost of living crisis through inflation at this moment in time. And he described that as unconservative. Now, the reason the battle lines are being drawn in this way is that this is not a battle for the heart and soul of the general British public, but purely for the estimated 160,000 or so members, signed up members of the Conservative Party. They are the people who are picking between these two candidates to become the leader of the ruling Conservative Party and therefore the next Prime Minister of the UK. And that's why we might have been hearing them saying the kind of things that appeals to those Conservative Party members, people who skew predominantly older, middle class, white, rather than things that appeal to the general public in general. Liz Truss is the front runner in terms of opinion polls when it comes to those Conservative Party members. Rishi Sunak is more of a front runner when it comes to the general opinion of the public at large. So the question now is who those members are going to choose. Someone who does the kind of things that they like in the here and now, or someone who's more likely to build a consensus across the political divide and could help win the Conservatives the next general election.
All right, Ty, well, talking about Boris Johnson for a second, he sought to clarify a meeting which he had with the former KGB agent Alexander Lebedev in 2018, now saying, this is a quote, "As far as I'm aware, no government business was discussed." Will that ease concerns, do you think?
I think that's doubtful, Helena. There has always been a murkiness to this meeting, which happened a good few years ago now at this stage, although only very recently in the last few weeks confirmed by Boris Johnson just before his resignation, even though it was widely reported at the time that Johnson had attended a party at a villa belonging to the Lebedevs in Italy. He was even pictured at the airport heading home by some British holidaymakers, reportedly looking a little dishevelled and hungover. Now we're getting new details clarified by Boris Johnson in a letter to a committee of MPs, clarifying the details that he offered to that same committee a few weeks ago. That key line, no government business was discussed as far as I'm aware. Well, it certainly does raise questions as to who else would have been aware as to what exactly was discussed, because he was unaccompanied by any officials, even though he was the foreign minister at the time. It was, he said, a social event. And it does raise another question as whether a friendly meeting with a former KGB agent is any better than a business meeting. Now, Alexander Lebedev is no ordinary oligarch or even ex-KGB agent. His son is Evgeny Lebedev, the owner of a very prominent newspaper here in London, the Evening Standard, somebody Boris Johnson would have cultivated a friendship with at a time when he was the mayor of London, and subsequently he awarded him a seat in the House of Lords. Now, Boris Johnson's trying to point the finger at other Labour MPs in this letter who also had links with Lebedev. Really, it does further tarnish Johnson's reputation, but of course at a time when he's on his way out the door anyway, so some would say it's all a bit academic.
All right, Ty again right there reporting from London. Ty, thanks a lot. Well, still to come, the European Union has approved a smallpox vaccine for use against monkeypox. We'll be checking in with a doctor after the break to get you up to date with everything you need to know. Welcome back to the programme. Good to have you with us. The growing number of new monkeypox cases across Europe is sparking concern, with the World Health Organization warning that the risk of infection on the continent is high. Now, the European Union has approved a smallpox vaccine for use against the disease. In France, where about 1,700 people have been infected with the virus, authorities have opened more than 100 vaccination centres. France is just one of nearly 70 countries with confirmed monkeypox outbreaks where the disease was not originally endemic, a global spread that the World Health Organization organisation says represents a global health emergency. Just under 10,000 cases have been reported in the European Union as a whole. Well, joining me now is Dr. Bharat Pankhania, Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School. Great to have you with us, Doctor. Now, we saw at the weekend that WHO went ahead. They declared monkeypox a public health emergency of international concern. How worried should we be?
I think with monkeypox, we can control it, maintain it, and eliminate it. So whilst the WHO has declared it as a public health emergency of international concern, my view is, yes, okay, that is a call to action. But the actions that we can take, provided we take these actions fast, early, and extensively, we can control it, manage it, and remove it from human circulation. If we don't remove it from human circulation, my concerns are, if it becomes present in the animal population, then we've got a problem.
So we've got the actions which no doubt public health authorities will be taking in terms of contact tracing and so on. But what about protecting ourselves? What can we do? Because right now we're seeing vaccines being approved for use in Europe. Should we ourselves be seeking to get vaccinated?
No, not at all. So people in the at-risk groups will be offered the vaccines, and that is correct. So it's at risk, I mean, people, men who have sex with men, men who are bisexual, as well as healthcare workers, and also contacts of those cases. So at the moment, we need to do targeted vaccines rather than vaccinate everyone. And by the way, people who are aged over 50 will have some immunity from the days when they were immunized against smallpox all those years ago.
And if someone thinks that they may have been in contact with someone who potentially has monkeypox, they think that they might be infected, what should they do?
Well, the first thing is don't go and make a few more cases of your own. So you will isolate yourself, pick up the phone and call your doctor and discuss this with your doctor. Do not turn up at the local A&E or your doctor's surgery. Best to go home and then call your doctor from your home.
All right, crystal clear advice there from Dr. Bharat Pankhania, Senior Clinical Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School in the UK. As ever, thanks for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you.
Well, it is crunch time at the Women's European Championships as England's Lionesses take on Sweden in the first semi-final tie of the competition. England coming into the fixture on the back of an impressive quarter-final victory against Spain, but the players will be all too aware of their worrying track record of 3 semi-final defeats in 7 years. Now, Sweden beat Belgium by 1-0 in their quarter-final game despite a below-par performance from Europe's top-ranked team. They'll be hoping to take one step closer to their first final since the Tokyo Olympic Games in 2020. So can the Lionesses and their semi-final end their semi-final curse, or will the Swedes prove too tough a challenge? Well, to give us his thoughts, we're joined now by sports reporter Michael Kern. Michael, I have to say it is a bit of a mouth-watering tie because we've got England. They've kind of got a point to prove here, I guess, and we've got big expectations from the Swedish side. So how do you see this one going?
Do you know what? It's going to be incredibly close for sure. The atmosphere is going to be electric inside Bramall Lane. And if there's anything to go by the atmosphere in that quarter-final match for England as well, it's going to be pretty special. As you mentioned, they were on the ropes about 6 minutes from elimination before Ella Toone obviously levelled things up. And then Georgie Stanway went on to score that winner. The atmosphere on that night was absolutely incredible. Their boss, Sabrina Wiegman, has told press that this England team are ready to play their best game they can against Sweden and want to inspire their nation. As you said, that's semi-final curse. Can they get through that? Well, of course, you mentioned as well, Sweden, top-ranked European team. The last time they won a trophy was in 1984 in the Euros. They beat England on penalties after that game finished level after 2 legs. So I know traditionally England like a penalty shootout. I think the fans inside the stadium tonight, from an England perspective, would like it all done in 90 minutes. But either way, it's going to be a tough test for both of these sides who have had a good Euro so far. Sweden, their quarter-final, they weren't as convincing as they'd hoped to have been. But for them, statistically, they had 33 shots on target. They only managed to put one in the back of the net, but they are dangerous. They will create chances. So if anyone's got a ticket and going to that game tonight, they're going to be very much in for a treat. And who's going to come out on top, we'll have to wait and see.
Not committing there, I see, Michael. So the winner of this tie will face either Germany or France. I mean, how are these sides looking at this stage?
Well, look, for Germany, they've won 8 of the 12 European Women's Championships. They're the only team yet to concede a goal in the whole competition. They've beaten Denmark, Sweden, Finland. Of course, they had Austria in the quarterfinals. They've scored 11 goals and haven't conceded one. So, of course, Germany are incredibly dangerous. They're in great form for this one. Third-ranked team France, that's who they're taking on. They've never won a big trophy. They ended their quarterfinal curse, a bit like we were talking there about England, their semi-final curse. For the Blues, they've gone out in the past 5 major tournaments in the quarter-final stage. So they've done, they'll be pleased to get through to a semi-final for them. Like Sweden as well, they had 33 chances in their last game, France, only scoring 1 goal. They were lively in the first half, and obviously they got their winner in extra time there. But do you know what? I think we've got 4 teams here in these semi-finals that are, very deserving winners if they can go all the way. So hopefully we're going to have some great games of football in both of these semi-finals.
Looking forward to it. Sports reporter there, Michael Kern. Good to talk to you, Michael. Thank you. Well, plenty more coming up after a short break. Do stay with us if you can. You're watching Euronews tonight. Welcome back. A Russian state TV channel has claimed that Oxford University is revoking the degrees of 10,000 students with links to the Kremlin and that British police are already destroying the diplomas. A bizarre example of fake news, but where did it come from? Well, our team in The Cube has been looking into it.
Well, Helena, social media users as well as Russian state TV have been spreading disinformation that the University of Oxford will be revoking 10,000 diplomas of children of Russian officials and that the administration will not be refunding the tuition fees, much to the horror of certain social media users. And so the article also includes a quote from the supposed Vice-Chancellor of Oxford, a Sir Louis Lawrence, who claims that the university cannot issue diplomas to people from authoritarian regimes. But we had a quick look at the official university website and we found that this person does not exist. What we did find is that we traced this article to Panorama, which is a Russian website, and it is actually a satirical newspaper, and each article has a disclaimer that these stories are fake. However, this did not stop Rossiya 1 TV channel, which is the biggest state media in Russia, to pick up the story. And Dmitry Kiselov, who is one of the star presenters of the channel, was discussing Western sanctions when he brought up this story about Oxford. He actually went on a 2-minute rant about how ridiculous this decision was. And it's only at the end that he did mention that the story was a parody, but then himself said that he found it very realistic and actually quite plausible. And so the Panorama website even took this clip and jokingly tweeted that we are back on Russian TV. And Helena, we've contacted the University of Oxford, who have confirmed that this is indeed false and not part of the policy of the institution.
Well, Sophia, we know that once fake news is out there, it can fly, so thanks for debunking it for us. You're up to date. Thanks for your company. I'll see you soon.